It's very interesting that Antarctica to me has both a hoop and a tree. And that is why I'm drawn to it, because the way that I would say it is that it has masculine, feminine principles. It's an integrated place. So there's a connection there. So I'm Leilani Henry again, and I wanted to tell you that I woke up today feeling very emotional. And what hit me was that this journey that I've been on has been full of synchronicities and full of things that made the book possible, things that I hadn't really thought about that would make the book possible. So one of the things is this diary. It started with my father's diary, and I should be wearing white gloves. I know if you're an archivist, you're probably cringing, but I just want to show you just a couple, oh, it's hard to see. Anyway, my father carried this, protected this diary throughout the years from 1941 until he passed away in 2000. And he protected it from fog and sea ice. They were the USS Bear, a very 66-year-old wooden ship, was almost stuck in the ice several times. He almost died catching penguins in a whale boat. So through all of that, he protected the diary. Then he went to World War II, and his ship was sunk with 49 shells and 1 torpedo, and he ended up in shark-infested waters overnight. And the ship was obviously burning, so his diary was protected from that. Years of moving. There's a funny story about my parents. When they got married, my father just had a suitcase, and the suitcase was empty, except for his papers. He had no clothing in the suitcase. And so he protected in that way in a suitcase. And then he lost the diaries, and they were behind the dresser, luckily in a plastic container. And my mother found the diaries after he passed away. So I woke up thinking about, I wouldn't be here if he hadn't protected those my book wouldn't be here if he hadn't protected the diaries. And of course, I wouldn't have been here if he had lost his life in any of those extreme environments as well. And then in terms of my story, this book would not have come into fruition had I not met Tim Broad, who is a beekeeper in Boulder. We met on an airplane, and he ended up introducing me to the whole Antarctic community internationally. And that was the beginning of me writing an article, and then meeting Ted Scambos, who wrote the foreword to the book and is my science mentor. So just really full of all of the synchronicities. And then finally, the synchronicity of the book is that a friend of a friend, sister was the acquiring editor at Lerner Publishing, and they invited me to do a concept I hadn't thought about, which was using my father's story to introduce people to the continent. So again, I'm just very grateful. The book is an introduction to Antarctica, Antarctica 101. I meet many people that think they're polar bears in Antarctica. They think that, people once lived there, and, maybe people once did live there, but it was a very long time ago. And some people think they're ETs still living there. So who knows? The point though is that really understanding the continent from my father's eyes is what I did. So I want to read I'll talk and read a little bit, and I have some slides, but this is Ted Scambos's part of his foreword. Gibbs experienced both the inner and the outer kinds of discovery on his journey. He had the adventure of a lifetime, and he embraced his role as part of a diverse team. He saw landscapes and wildlife that awed him. He felt the burn of racial discrimination, but he also knew interracial teamwork and harmony. He saw how other nations put less importance on skin color and more importance on fellowship. These experiences shaped him and set him on a course to become a civic leader and a civil rights advocate in his state and the nation. Above all, his example shows the power of outlook, attitude, and optimism. No matter the situation, Gibbs steered clear of resentment and focused on experiences, on being present. He appreciated every aspect of his journey, inward and outward, and spoke about the experience for the rest of his life. He felt the call of Antarctica. And I definitely inherited that call. I stopped and started this research project many, many times. And the only reason that I didn't give up is because it has a life of its own. And I was led by the hand from beyond the veil, is what it feels like. My father's favorite phrase is, we are all in the same boat, and don't give up the ship. And so the don't give up the ship was especially potent during this time of writing. And what draws me to Antarctica is not only the past, present, and the future, the opportunity for humanity to evolve, that this continent is a model for how we can come together. We came together in the past. The Antarctic Treaty was signed in 1959 and went into effect in 1960. And 12 nations came together to say, we want to protect this for the interests of peace, no military, no fighting, and for the interests of science, so we can understand our world better. And yeah, there's some fighting behind the scenes and some bickering about resources. Mostly though, it is an amazing example of how the world can come together. So the other message is about cooperation and working together. And we know that we do come together during trying times. We don't often come together when in good times. And so in Antarctica, you can't do anything by yourself. Even if you're skiing by yourself across Antarctica, you have to check in with somebody. So this is an opportunity for us to understand that working together will help us evolve. So another thing to read is a diary entry. And this gives you an idea of the difficulty. My father didn't complain very much about this experience, and yet you get a sense in between the lines how difficult it was, they worked long hours. It's amazing that he wrote every day for 6 months, at least a paragraph. So I've tried to write every day for 6 months, and I have not yet been successful. Today at noon, en route to Little America, we ate our first meal south of Cape Horn. If Cape Horn is as rough as the sea is tonight, I'm not as anxious to go around it as I was. I can hardly write, as we are in a sea that is a sea. If you don't know what I mean, try breaking in a wild horse. Of course, the horse would get tired and give in, but this is getting to be a 24-hour routine. We had heavy sleet this morning. It's very cold, and the boys are putting heavy underwear on. And that was December 27th, 1939. So he talks about working round the clock, either trying to hold on to the ship or trying to sleep and not being able to sleep in these conditions. And also his entries give you a sense that he was always paying attention to the larger community. He was always, paying attention to what the captain was doing, what the sea men were doing. He just wasn't in his own world, in his own bubble. If you don't know, he was a mess attendant at that time. In that time in the world, Jim Crow was the lay of the land for the US. And this was a military expedition for the Navy. And so the 3 Black men aboard the ship were the lowest level, working in the kitchen as in the steward branch. And so the nice thing about it is that he was able to, because, you know, all hands on deck, because we're all on the same boat, that Admiral Byrd and Captain Cruzen made sure that if something was needed to be done, that anyone could volunteer. And at some point, people were volunteered. And he did that with zeal and a smile, and won 2 awards at 2 Navy awards for his extraordinary character. So let me show you a few slides here. So I like this photo because even though you don't know necessarily what he looks like, you can sort of see the team of people, you can see the fog, and they're looking across the water at the North Star, which was the sister ship. So I had mentioned that the USS Bear is a 66-year-old wooden ship at this time, and it was Admiral Byrd's favorite ship, and they took it out of a museum to sail it. And then the North Star was a brand new ship. And then this is the base that they built. I mentioned Little America when I read, and it was called Little America 3. And Admiral Byrd built Little America 1 and 2 on his own with his team. And you may know his story that he needed to be rescued in the middle of the night in the second expedition because he had fumes. He was asphyxiated and almost died, and was an amazing rescue. And then he went back again on the third expedition, and they're going down into the tunnels, down into the housing. This was a classified mission, and so there's not a lot written about this expedition. And in fact, in the diaries, my father does not explain what they did exactly. So that was part of the research, is understanding building bricks and understanding the stovepipes and all the things that they did to create the tunnels to make it safe for them to live, for the men to live down there. And then Little America 3, that's the flag. As you notice, there are 48 stars. And I think that's fascinating. That was the first time that I had seen and touched a flag that old. And then this is the East Base. So they built 2 bases. They were going to build a 3rd base, the snow cruiser. You can read about the snow cruiser in the book. And they ended up not being able to use the snow cruiser. So the West Base, I just showed you, floated away on an iceberg, no longer exists. And the East Base still exists. It's a beautiful, well-preserved building, as you can see. And I hope to be able to see that one day. This next piece is just talking about the art, that every expedition from the very beginning had an artist on it, even before photography, even during photography, there was always the art. And part of the reason for the Call of Antarctica is to help people understand STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and math. And now we've included A for art, so STEAM. And I think it's appropriate, knowing that Antarctica, that the expeditions always had artists. So this is from my father's autograph book. This isn't in the book, so this is a special treat. He had an autograph book and had many, many famous people in the autograph book. And Leland Curtis was from Denver, and he was the artist. So best cordial greetings and best wishes from Leland Curtis. And then there's myself. I tracked down some of Leland Curtis's artwork, and this is in the book. And that's me in California seeing the painting, because this museum, Laguna Beach Museum, has this in their collection. And it's a stunning piece to be able to see it in person. And I'm just on cloud 9, being able to see it and experience it and stand near it and feel the energy of the expedition. And then one more thing to show you is that I played a game, and it's called Table Topics, and it's a dialogue game. And this is a card that I got. Which piece of land would you preserve forever? And this was when I was writing the book, and it was obvious. The obvious answer is Antarctica. So let's see what else I can tell you. So there are at least one person here from the Thwaites Glacier team that I'm working with. I'm working with a team of scientists. Feel very privileged as a result of my work with Ted Scambos, and I'm now working with Antarctic scientists who are going to the ice. And this is the first time that they've had time or taken the time to come together as a group and think about what are the values? How do we want to treat each other? What agreements do we make in order to make our work smooth? Thwaites Glacier, if you haven't heard about that, it's one of the most unstable glaciers in Antarctica. It's the size of Florida or Great Britain, and it's in the news quite a bit. And the most exciting thing for me at this time is that Admiral Byrd was mapping this territory during the expedition he was on. And so in the book, there are some excerpts of them actually doing that. Let me see if I can find one here. So here is one about magnetic South Pole. Because when I was growing up, my father didn't say the word Antarctica. He said the South Pole. This is our trip to the South Pole. And I since found out that they were trying to find the magnetic South Pole, and they didn't actually reach it because of a storm. En route for magnetic South Pole, about 1/2 of the fellows who live on the ice came aboard to the Bear to have coffee and say goodbye to us until next year, as we are leaving Little America, and we will go by ship as close as we can possibly get to magnetic South Pole. Then Admiral Byrd plans to fly over it from the ship and explore. He also wants to observe why it causes the compass needlepoint to move temporarily off its course. Admiral Byrd believes in using the Bear as his base to fly back and forth. We will find the cause, thus improving the compass magnetically. So even though my father wasn't a scientist, again, he was tracking what they were doing for the expedition and why they were doing it, and how much of the continent they were mapping, and all of that is in his diaries. So Ted Scambos was the one who helped me understand that that's what they were doing, and that now the Thwaites Glacier is the one that the world is looking at. And in articles now, in science articles, they say that this happened during the expedition Admiral Byrd 3. I think finally, what I want to just reinforce is that it's the name of the book, Exploring and Protecting Earth's Coldest Climate. A lot of times when we talk about climate change and climate crisis, we want to talk about it as we need to save the Earth. We don't need to save the Earth. The Earth is going to be here long after we leave. What we need to save Antarctica because we need to save ourselves. And so to me, the call of Antarctica is for us to wake up and evolve as a species, for us to understand cooperation, and for us to also cultivate inside of ourselves this, in the hoop and the tree example of, how can we be peaceful? What does inner peace look like? And then how do I reach out and have optimal relationships, not in trying times, but in regular times as well. I heard recently on a podcast, or actually was a conference with the Dalai Lama, and at the end they talked about they did a study with 10,000 youth, and 75% of those youth feel frightened of the future, and 56% of the youth feel that humanity is doomed. So, we need to work together across differences. You can't do anything alone in Antarctica, as I mentioned, and that's the message for all of us. So thanks for being here, and we are happy to take some questions.